All right, everyone, I'm super excited about today's episode. I have on Nicole Kalil, and she is a speaker, performance coach, and the author of Validation is for Parking, which I love that title. And I'm super excited to talk with her about confidence, about sometimes things that feel overwhelming, uncertain, or scary. Nicole likes to help women connect to their confidence and getting clear on who they are, owning who they are, and embracing all of it, and maybe even breaking some of those patterns or cycles that we didn't know were there. And so I'm super excited to dive into it with her today. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
I am absolutely thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. I also just want to let everybody know too that if you hear a child in the background, I've never had this issue before, but my youngest, who just turned 1, she is the loudest creature on earth. Like, I do not understand how loud her voice is and how far it carries. So she could be like on the opposite side of the house and she just squawks. She's just like an excited kid. She loves to make noise. I can't hear her right now, but if you hear a random scream in the background, it's Tula. So
yeah. Future public speaker in the making.
Oh my gosh, this girl's voice booms. I'm like, how are you this loud? It is crazy.
I love it.
Yeah, but I want to dive into, how did you get into all of this? Because that must be a very empowering, fulfilling career for you to do. But usually people have kind of gone through their own journey that led them to this point.
Absolutely. Yes. Of course, we all have our journeys. And what I find to be true more often than not is what ends up being our passion or our mission often is rooted from some pain in our past. And that is true for me. So the shorter version of my story is I was an executive at a Fortune 100 financial services company. I was the first and only woman in my role for a very long period of time. And I figured out how to look the part. I looked like the independent, strong, successful woman on the rise with my who needs a man attitude. I put in air quotes. And people were constantly commenting on my confidence. What was problematic is it was completely different on the inside than how it looked on the outside. I was incredibly lonely. I lacked confidence at the highest level. I was, had an above average spending problem to go with my above average income. I was not clear what my purpose was, and I was faking it most of the time. And so, as it often does, it became unbearable for me. I always say equal parts regret and alcohol led me to a low point in my life where I recognized I wanted to be confident, and people were telling me I was confident, and I was surrounded by messaging of how important it is to be confident, but nobody could tell me how you actually build it. And so I started researching, reading, observing anything I could get my hands on about confidence. And what helped me then became a passion to share with others and to, make this my life's work and my mission. The reality is we are not born as women with less confidence than any other gender, but over time we're socialized out of it. And so we see women entering their 20s and 30s, entering the workforce, entering relationships, entering parenthood with less confidence than their male counterparts. And these are big life seasons. And wouldn't it be so beneficial and so helpful to do it with even just a little bit more confidence? So that's what led me here.
Wow. Yeah. I love what you just said. Well, one thing kind of jumped out to me when you were talking about everyone commented on the outside, but that's not how you felt on the inside. I'm like, oh, so that fake it till you make it thing isn't always true, because we can kind of fake things, put it out there, but it's not like then just overnight that confidence is going to be there. There's still work to do.
Yeah, it's funny. I used to say fake it till you make it in my professional career. And now I wish I could go apologize to each person, especially as women. I mean, let's be honest, we're faking far too much as it is. It sounds like semantics, but my spin on the fake it till you make it is choose it until you become it. Choose confidence, choose happiness, choose whatever it is that you desire. Make the conscious choice, the shift in mindset, choose it until the feeling catches up. It always does eventually, but I think a lot of us have confidence as something that we either feel or we don't feel. And one of the really empowering realizations in my learning about confidence is that confidence is more of a choice than it is a
Mhm.
feeling.
Yeah, I love that too. Another thing that like stuck out to me when you were saying that, just kind of like I was actually just recently telling my mom that I just started going back to therapy like months ago. And one thing is like I don't know when when I lost my confidence. Like I can look back, I remember as a kid, like standing up in front of my entire church and like just making up a song and thinking that I was awesome, right? Like I used to do speech competitions in elementary and junior high and go to like national competitions and stand up in front of people and do speech. And then somewhere like along the way, I lost confidence. Like in my
Mhm.
20s, I was terrified of public speaking. Like so many different things happened and I'm like, where did this shift come? Like where did it change? And I think so much of it is culture and societal and all this subliminal messaging that we're receiving. And then I see it being a birthing doula in the birth world. So
Mhm.
you start going to these appointments and you want to ask questions and you want to advocate for yourself, but they're like, oh, but there's like this patriarchal system and they must know what they're doing. But you're getting these messages of even in birth, like I get so annoyed with the stories I hear when they're like, and I felt like I needed to push. And they're like, oh no, honey, no, you don't. And they're like, no, I need to push. And
Yeah,
then
my
they check
body
and
is
they're like,
screaming at me. Yeah.
right. And they check and they're like, oh my gosh. And they're like, yeah, see, I told you, like, just believe us, just listen. Like, like I just see that so much in like in the birthing world, like even in motherhood, then it starts. Like if you're getting questioned when you're trying to make decisions for your body in birthing, and then you're getting questioned in motherhood. And it's like, oh my gosh, when does it stop? Like, how am I supposed to step into this confidence in this entire new role, this entire new life change? It's that term matrescence, like how there's adolescence and matrescence. It's like you are in a completely different season of life. Your
Yeah.
hormones are different. You're a whole new person taking care of a whole new person, and you feel like you're being bombarded and questioned. Like, how do you show up confident in that?
Yeah. Well, first, Liz, you are dead on, and it's not just you. Research and data shows that the separation happens for most women or young girls between the ages of 7 and 9.
Mm,
And it just keeps widening and widening. And then around the late 30s and 40s, it starts to come back together. And for the first time in the 50s is when we see women and men having the same level of confidence. And then in the 60s, women actually have more confidence. And we could get into why
wow.
that is. But the point is that for most of us, there is a separation from our own confidence that happens at a young age. And there is this sort of, you know, gap, and it's existing in our teens, 20s, and 30s where we go through some of our biggest life changes. We make some
Mhm.
of our most important decisions. We do really big, scary, bold things like create tiny humans and raise them. So yeah, I mean, it is not just you. And then you asked me a question, Liz, and I just blanked out on what it was. What was the
Oh, just kind of
follow?
like how do we get that confidence then? Because it feels like once you start making those life changes. So whether it's you going for your career, right? Like we expect 18-year-olds to know what they want to do or their
Right.
purpose in life, which is ridiculous. But some people do, right? There are the select few that are like,
Some.
this is right, right. That
Yeah.
I know. I was not that person. And I always felt like I was so questioned of like, well, what are you going to do with your life, basically?
Mhm.
And and I don't know, I don't think it's necessarily different for guys and girls. I feel like guys kind of have a different mentality, maybe more driven toward money versus passion. I'm not sure on that at all, but like for me, I'm like, well, there has to be something that aligns between like my passions, my gifts, my talents, what I'd like to do, whatever, how I
Yes.
want to show up in the world. And that took me until like my late 20s to realize that. But just like feeling like you're being questioned like on every step of the journey. And then, yeah, entering the pregnancy, like where you're choosing to birth or that you're choosing to have kids or whatever it is, it's like you're constantly being questioned when you're already in that like you were kind of describing, that confidence is that lack of it's widening and widening and doesn't even start coming back together till later. So like how can we show up in confidence or start to work on regaining that, especially in these pivotal moments in our lives?
Yeah. Beautiful question. And there are absolutely things that we can do that are within our control anytime we want that will build confidence. But before I even talk about that, I want to set the baseline of what confidence actually is.
Yeah, that's
I
good.
think the reality is we talk about it. We use this word, it's thrown about all over the place in so many different contexts, and it's sort of gotten watered down, and we forgot what it even means. And so I call it the confidence con. One of the things that's so hard for us as women is we've been tricked. We've been conned into believing that we gain confidence in ways that we don't gain confidence, or that confidence shows up or is received in ways that it isn't and it doesn't. So, what is confidence? Confidence is firm and bold trust in self. So, the root of the word confidence, you go to the etymology of the word, which I will spare you all the details, but I geeked out on this for a while. The root of the word confidence is trust, that firm and bold trust in self. It translates into that in every language. Faith, belief plays a part, but it's ultimately about trust. If you think about the iterations of the word, confidant, it's a trusted friend, or confidential. You keep information private, and there's a trust element of that. Even like a con artist or a confidence man, a con man, this isn't just a thief. This is somebody who steals by gaining trust first. So confidence is rooted in the word trust. And so feeling confident, being confident, choosing confidence is all about the trust we have in ourselves. The con is that we've been led to believe that confidence is going to come to us from some external source. So when I have perfectly behaved children, then I'll feel confident. When my birth plan goes perfectly according to plan, then I'll feel confident. When I achieve a certain level of success, when the scale says a certain number, when I fit into a certain size, when I have a certain amount of followers on social, the list goes on and on and on and on. But the come from is this false equation. When X happens, X being any one of those things, then I'll feel confident. And the reality doesn't work that way, because no one and nothing is out there walking around with your confidence. It's not some weird life's game of Where's Waldo, where you've got to find them and get them to give it to you. Your confidence only ever always lives inside of you. And it's something we get to build anytime we want. But we've been separated. We've been separated from our confidence because of these false and mixed messages, because of this unconscious belief that we have that it's like, if we meet the person of our dreams, then we'll feel confident. Or if we just look beautiful enough or young enough, then we'll feel confident. And so it gets really, really confusing, because even when you get the things, it doesn't work. And then you become addicted to the thing, right? So like if I say, if I'm just thin enough, then I'll feel confident. Well, if I do it from that place, I'll lose some weight. I might feel good temporarily, but then at some point in time, I need to lose just 5 more pounds or just 1 more pound. Or maybe I lost the weight, but now I need bigger boobs or what, and then you become obsessed with this thing because you think it's supposed to bring you confidence, and it's ultimately doing more harm than good.
When you said the definition of what confidence is, I got goosebumps, because that's so good. Just that trust in self. So it's like somewhere along the line that those cultural and subliminal messages that we've been receiving turn into like that lack of trust in ourselves, that lack of, I can no longer trust myself in this situation. And I see that showing up. I wouldn't say it necessarily trust, but I see it showing up in parenthood, in like turning into old lies or lies that we've believed as truths. Like one thing that you see a lot, I think for women especially, is worthiness. Like I'm not worth it, or I'm not good enough, or, you know, I mean, that's the one that I feel like I resort to. Like, they deserve a better mom. They, whatever it is, because like didn't do something perfectly. Like, that's ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
But somewhere along the line, we've also like believed these lies that affect that confidence, having that trust in ourselves. And then whether you've done work before or not, I just feel like motherhood, parenthood pops up these new things, because all of a sudden you have these little kids that are their own beings that we don't
Yeah.
control. That, like you said, if I had perfectly behaved kids, then I could be confident. And it's like, well, your kids are never going to perfectly behave, because they're learning how to exist in this world, which means pushing boundaries and figuring things out. And so our confidence can't come from those outside sources.
Right.
So I'd love for you to just kind of share, maybe like in this season, I'm trying to figure out how to like ask the question. Do you get what I'm like trying to say? Just kind of like how.
I think I get what
Okay.
you're saying, and let me dive in, and then maybe it'll trigger a follow-up, or you can tell me
Perfect.
if I'm totally off base. But first, parenting is hard. Like, there is nothing that shakes our confidence more, I think, than being a mom. Why? Because nothing feels more important. Nothing, you know, matters more, it seems like. And we look at these tiny humans and we love them so much and we want the best for them. And the reality is, we all enter parenthood with our own stuff. Good parents, bad parents, everything in between. We all have these beliefs that exist that when we're under pressure, when we're feeling stressed, when we're overwhelmed, when something's really important, we default to them. I don't care how much therapy, and I go to therapy too. I don't care how much therapy we do. We make progress on those beliefs, but it's usually when, like I always say, when it gets hot out, meaning when we're under stress or under pressure, those beliefs flare back up. They might look a little bit different. They might come out in different ways. But of course, they come out. So what do we do? How do we choose confidence in moments like that? First, understanding that trusting yourself doesn't mean that you have all the answers, that you know what you're doing, or that you're doing it perfectly or even well. Trusting yourself is knowing that you'll figure it out. Trusting yourself that even if you make mistakes, everything's going to be okay, that you can recover from them. Trusting yourself in this scenario could be, these children came through me, and that is not an accident. So
Mhm.
I must be the right and the best mom for this little being. That does not mean perfection. Perfection is the enemy of confidence. Perfection is an
Mhm.
unachievable, unattainable goal. But confidence is trusting. So my daughter's 9 years old, and I know I've made mistakes, and I know I'm an imperfect mother, but I know I love her. I know she came through me. I trust that that is not an accident. And I trust that the very best thing I can do to create a confident being is to demonstrate it the best that I can, to choose to trust myself, to choose that I will get back up and dust myself off and get back in action during the hard moments or when I make mistakes. Um, so, I mean, there's lots of ways to do it, but that's where my brain went as you were talking. Because I think a lot of times we think
Mhm.
trusting ourselves means that we have it all figured out, and it's in fact the opposite. It's when things are hard, or we fear we're failing, or when we're experiencing fear or doubt. Those are our greatest opportunities for confidence building, because it's easy to trust ourselves when everything's going according to plan, when we're winning, when we're achieving, when we said the right thing, when our kids are in a good place. Choosing to trust ourselves during the hard points,
Mhm.
that's where the real magic happens.
Right. Yeah, that's so good. And it's funny, because like in parenting, I feel like when you talk to certain people, they're like, nobody knows what they're doing. Like, we're all
No, but
just
oh,
figuring it out.
okay. I like when somebody says they're a parenting expert, like my eyes want to roll back in their head. And I know what they mean. It's the same thing when somebody says I'm a confidence expert. I'm like, no, how can you be an expert on something that complex? But I think what we're saying is somebody made it their life's work, but
Mhm.
nobody has anything figured out as far as I can tell. Nobody has success completely figured out. Nobody has parenting completely figured out. Nobody has marriage or partnership completely figured out. We are all imperfect beings doing the very best that we can. And I think the opportunity to trust we do have value. We do have worth. We do have purposes. It might be one main purpose that you've known your whole life, and it might be a multitude of them that you're figuring it out along the way. But the fact that you're here and there's no other you that has ever been or ever will be makes you freaking magical in my mind. And so the better we can connect with our true and authentic selves, the more we can trust ourselves. I think the more we enjoy life and the better off we'll be.
Yeah. Um, so two things. My dad like loves to share this story, and I can't remember the book or the author, but he said like growing up, there was this lady who had a kid and wrote these parenting books and like was a parenting expert per se, and thought that she had everything figured out, and then she had her second kid. And like, and she was like, oh wait, never mind. Just kidding. Scrap all of that, because like each kid is so different. You do have some kids that are just more easygoing and you're like, hey, put that back. And they're like, okay. And then you have kids that are like, what? No, you put it back. And you're like, oh, like kids have such different personalities. And so you find that with so many things, and like all these, it's so nuanced. Like each person's an individual, and how you're just saying, like, even for you to be here is magic. I know that Mel Robbins has something about like the probability of you being here. And I saw something else on Instagram the other day about like the amount of circumstances for you to be on this planet is like 1 in billions, because like your great grandparents had to meet, you're on each side, like that DNA passed down through each generation, and then your parents, and that was the egg and that was the sperm and that they conceived. Like the chances of you, any single person being here, like you said, is absolute magic. Like it's crazy how every single thing has to go right just for you to be you. Like if your mom would have conceived a month before, you wouldn't be here.
It's unbelievable if you start going down that rabbit hole, and the idea that you existed in your grandmother's body. Like there's so many things. What you were saying earlier made me think of, and I'm going to butcher it, but it's a meme that says something to the effect of other people's kids are the easiest to raise. And it's that
Totally.
like everybody has an opinion. And when you look at other people, I wouldn't do that, or what, it's like, well, you're not in it and they're not your kid and you're not their parent. And so, I mean, gosh, nothing triggers more comparison and judgment than being a mom. And I think that is probably one of the biggest opportunities we have as women, is to let some of that go, set some of that aside, and certainly not have it impact us individually at such a great level, because it's really messing everyone up
Oh,
as far as I
totally.
can tell.
Yeah. Well, I was the best mom before I had kids.
Oh, yeah. Oh, imaginary kids are even easier to raise than other people's kids. Yeah.
Right. Totally. My kids would never do that. Are you kidding me?
I know. I can vividly remember my kid will never look at a phone in a restaurant.
Right.
We do the best we can.
I just saw something on Instagram today that spoke to me, because I've definitely been guilty of it. And this lady was posting how she doesn't do great with all the side holidays. Like, because we're recording this, I'm not sure when it will be released, but tomorrow's St. Patrick's Day, right? So there's parents that go all out for St. Patrick's Day for their kids. There's parents that go all out for every holiday. And there's parents who don't. There's parents who can't afford to. There's parents who it's just not their thing. And so this lady's like, it's not my thing. Like, so I'm always like, can we please stop with this? But she's like, who am I to judge how other parents choose to show love to their kids or want to make this exciting? Because she had a friend that told her growing up, came from a single mom home. They didn't have any money, and her mom would spend $5 each holiday, like going all out for them. And she said, we felt like the most like amazing, like on those holidays, like we got baskets for each one. Our mom went all out, and it was just always this thing that we look so much forward to. And she's like, wow, like that just like shifted that perspective of, if you want to go out every St. Patrick's Day for your kids and do that, great. If you want to do Elf on the Shelf for your kids, great. If you don't want to, don't. But like, let's not judge each other on this or even compare and be like, can you guys please stop doing that so that I feel better? You know?
Exactly. I think that the pressure has gotten us to a point where we're acting like crazy people. So I often say, so my daughter is 9, and I'm sure some people have judgment about this, but I often say to my daughter, "You didn't get that, mom." So if
Mhm.
they go tomorrow, she goes to school tomorrow and they do St. Patrick's Day, and there is like some mom who brings in cupcakes, I'm going to be so appreciative and so thankful that that mom did cupcakes. But my daughter didn't get that mom.
Mhm.
She got the mom she got. So we talk about like, this is the type of mom that I am. This is what's important to me. This is what you
Mhm.
can count on me for. This is what I do that's special and unique and different. And that's wonderful, and what that mom is doing is wonderful. That kid got that mom. How wonderful and lucky for
Mhm.
them. But
Mhm.
they can be it can be wonderful and lucky for them, and it can be wonderful and lucky for you, but you got this mom, and we're gonna do the best that we can together.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. That's like what it kind of went on to talk about too. It's like we're thankful for the moms that do all the class parties and do these different things, and like we're thankful, like let's just appreciate the different roles that we have, and we all do bring something different. Um I talked about it on here before, like going all out every holiday isn't going to be a thing for me. I just mentally, whatever, we have some small little traditions we're going to do. For me, it's not my thing, but I was allowing myself to feel guilty in comparing, even though I was choosing not to do it.
Yep.
But it doesn't mean that my kids are like suffering in some way or lacking. And you don't do it just because of the comparison either. Like that you have to
Yeah.
keep up. It's like if you
So
genuinely enjoy doing this, great. But if not, you can show your kids love in different ways.
absolutely, and in different but equally as valuable ways. Um, Comparison is a confidence derailer. It actually chips away and does damage. So oftentimes people think of confidence as walking into a room and going, I'm better than, or I have
Mhm.
it figured out, or whatever. That's not confidence. That's arrogance. That's ego. And
Mhm.
arrogance and ego are basically a big mask for all sorts of insecurities. Confidence is walking into a room and not needing to compare yourself to anyone at all.
Yeah. Mhm.
Confidence is I am me and I am good with who I am. That I trust that for me and my kids, the holidays, not that big of a deal.
Mhm.
If, if that's what you decide. We are big holiday decorators in our house, and that's one thing that we do, but other people don't, and that's fine too.
Mhm.
Um,
Right. I love that you touched on like the opposite, the ego though, because that's something that I've been guilty of as well. Like it's so easy to think that you have confidence when, let's say you go into a restaurant and the table next to you, they're 2-year-olds on a tablet and your 2-year-old's not. And you're like, look at me. Like my
mhm,
kid doesn't need a tablet at dinner. I'm so awesome. And it's like, that's not confidence. That's ego. That does not mean you're a better parent at all.
right.
Like, and it's so easy to, again, get it from outside validation. Let me see what's going on around me to see how good of a parent I am.
Yep.
And it's not
Absolutely.
true.
No, it's not true. And uh, one of a truth I believe is our judgment. So what happens is we compare ourselves to other people, and there can be healthy ways to do this, but one of the ways that you can tell if it's unhealthy is if it triggers a judgment. So
Mm-hmm.
comparison happens first, judgment happens next. It can be judgment of other people or it could be judgment of self. I think it's pretty easy to see how when you judge yourself or you fall short, like why am I not as successful as this person? Why am I not vacationing in Bali like this person? Why does my body not look like this person? I think it's easy to see in those moments why that would chip away at our confidence because we feel worse. But here's what's really interesting: if you compare and judge and come out ahead, like at least I'm a better parent than that person, or at least I'm not an
Mm-hmm.
idiot like that person, or at least I'm not whatever, right? It is still chipping away at your confidence because what you've slipped into again is arrogance and or ego, which is masking maybe not the same insecurity, but some insecurity. Our judgments, anybody's judgment, always gives you more insight to the person judging than the person being judged.
Mhm.
It always gives insight into the person judging what their values are, what their belief systems are, what their perceptions or interpretations of events. It's the person judging that really we get insight to, not the person being judged.
Mhm. Yeah, that's so good. Again, because like you said, it's easy to see it one way, but not when you're like, "Oh, look at me, I'm so awesome," you know?
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, I'm like guilty as I do that too. Like I'll catch myself, at least I'm not, or look at that.
Mhm.
And I have to catch myself and go, okay, this is chipping away at my confidence. What is this telling me? What is this giving me insight into about my beliefs, my values, my concerns, my insecurities? Now, I probably don't do this as often as I should, but when I do, it's always a helpful exercise to really get a sense of either what I'm worried about or what I'm feeling insecure about or what something is important to me or a value that, you know, again, JJ got this mom. Sometimes that gives me insight into this is a value that's important to me and I want to pass down. And that's okay. But that I don't
Mhm.
need to make somebody else wrong to figure that out.
Mhm. What are some other maybe tips that we can do to practice confidence as moms? Because again, it's something that I've really, really struggled with. Like, I don't know where along the way I lost my confidence. I don't know. I feel like there's certain aspects of my life that I'm confident in, and then there's like some where I scramble and I feel like I have to like read an entire book on something that I already know in order
Yeah.
to like show up and be like, okay, I can talk about this, even though I've studied it and I know it and I practice it and I do it. I'm like, okay, but like I just get rattled, and I would love some tips along with our listeners of how to just practice confidence as a parent.
Yeah. So I will give you the 5 confidence builders, and these build confidence in any area, any avenue, any arena of your life. And I'll try to tie them into parenting a little bit. But the 5 confidence builders first is action. Action builds confidence. You cannot hope, wish, fingers and toes cross your way into confidence. You must act your way into it. So taking action. So as a parent, I mean, first, the biggest action is becoming a parent, right? That it is a huge step. But I think this is something we do unconsciously a lot, and we don't give ourselves a lot of credit for. The actions that you're taking as parents are confidence builders, but we tend to focus so much on what we're not doing. And
Mhm.
so I would just encourage you to change the lens rather than thinking about what you didn't do or where you didn't measure up or where you didn't like, what about all the things that you did do? Like today, you got up with your child, you maybe in the middle of the night, you fed them, you dressed them, you loved them, you giggled with them, you sent them off to school, you got a million things that there's so much that we're doing. So I would say, action builds confidence. And really, a lot of times people are waiting around trying to get ready or feel ready before they'll get into action. But I think as it relates to being a mom specifically, we're taking a ton of action. We're just not acknowledging or recognizing it. We spend more time worrying about what we're not doing. So,
Mhm.
sort of shifting the focus, I think, could be a good confidence builder. The second confidence builder is failure. I know that seems counterintuitive. And I use that word because it has a big charge, but it could also be fear, getting messy, making mistakes, having doubts, understanding that all of that stuff is neutral. I know it doesn't feel neutral. We don't experience it as neutral, but it's neutral. How do we know? Because I could line up 10 women, have them experience the exact same thing, and we get 10 different interpretations of the event.
Mhm.
And so we are meaning making machines. We're making up stuff about what we're doing and not doing and the mistakes that we're making, the ways that we failed and all of that. And our opportunity is to allow ourselves to get messy, to um, fail, to make mistakes, but then to learn from them, grow from them. So if failure is a neutral event, rather than choosing to see them all as like, I'm the worst mom ever, these kids deserve better, there is another more productive, more empowered way to say it. Wow, this was a really great lesson for both me and my kid. I'm so glad that I learned that in this environment. It could have been way worse. Or what a gift that we got to have this conversation and we got to cry together or whatever. My point is that if you're making up one interpretation of the event, you have the opportunity to make a more productive, more empowered interpretation up and move forward from there. And that's, again, where the real confidence building work begins. I can pause there if you want, but I can share the other 3 confidence builders as well.
It's totally up to you. You
Okay.
can keep going. Yeah.
All right. So the third confidence builder is giving yourself grace on the journey. Ultimately, what we're talking about here is 2 things. First, it's only ever always a journey. Nobody arrives at confidence, plants a flag, and is like, "Whew, I'm done." It is an ongoing, ebbs and flows. Nobody's 100% confident 100% of the time. If they are, they're either a narcissist or they're completely detached from reality.
Yeah.
Nobody is 100% confident 100% of the time. So it is a journey. And because it's a journey, we must give ourselves grace. I'm going to give you the simplest version of this. Say to yourself what you would say to someone you love. So I often think of this. I have a daughter, and sometimes my brain gets all fired up about how I'm feeling. And I ask myself, what would I want for JJ in this situation? What would I want her to do? Because I certainly don't want my daughter, when she becomes mom, if she becomes a mom, to be racked with guilt all the time. I
Mhm.
don't want her to be over analyzing every single thing. I don't want her to be questioning her value and worth. I would never choose that for her. And so I'm trying really hard to practice not choosing that for myself. What would I want for her? I'd want her to let this go and move toward what matters. I would want her to acknowledge all the great ways she is a great mom. I would want whatever it is. So giving yourself grace, for me, that is talk to myself like somebody I love. Maybe another way to do it is if your best mom friend came to you and told you what you just experienced, what would you say to them? We're so much more generous. We're so much more accepting of the people that we love than we are ourselves. And I want to
Mhm.
begin to practice treating ourselves like someone we love.
Mhm.
The fourth confidence builder is choosing confidence. We talked about that a little bit earlier, but just again, understanding that it is a choice, not a feeling that arrives, and a skill that we can develop anytime we want. This is another one that I think we as moms are doing way more often than we give ourselves credit for. Think about it. If you just had a really bad day, but then you need to go pick up your child from school, or God, it doesn't even really matter how we feel. If our child is crying in the middle of the night or throwing up in the middle of the night, we get up and we're there. We
Mhm.
choose it regardless of the feeling because it matters enough. And so understanding that the choice comes first and then the feeling will catch up eventually. And then finally, the fifth confidence builder are all the things that you can do that build internal trust. So think about how you build trust with the people in your life or how they build trust with you. This will give you some insight into what's important to you because we all build trust a little bit differently because we're unique individuals. Having said that, I think there are a few generalities that work for most of us. Example, keep your commitments. We trust people more who keep their commitments, who do what they say they're going to do, and we trust people less that are flaky and we can't count on them. And so as you think about building internal trust, firm and bold trust in self, how does keeping your commitments play into it? Well, for most women, for most moms, that means keeping the commitments you make to yourself at the same level or potentially even more than the commitments you make to other people. So if you commit to yourself that you're going to prioritize your health by going for a walk or eating healthy or getting a certain amount of sleep, following through on those commitments to the extent that you can is going to be super important in building your trust in yourself. You constantly let those things go by the wayside. You're damaging and chipping away at the trust you have for yourself, and you're doing damage to your own confidence. Another thing here that I see us as moms do a lot that is damaging is we overcommit. And then we have no choice but to break commitments, and we tend to break the ones that don't involve anyone else, that are only with ourselves first. So be careful. Have your yes be your yes. Say maybe more, or I'll do my best, or if I can, or I'll try, and let your no's be your no's. So keeping your commitments. I actually, in my book, talk about how sleep is a confidence builder, because you build trust with yourself. But it's more when we don't get enough sleep, which is really hard with newborns. So I get that part. But when we don't get enough sleep, we're basically the equivalent of walking drunk people, right? And nobody trusts at a high level a very drunk person. So just getting some sleep so that you can maintain that internal trust. But there's lots of things: standing up for yourself, communicating your needs and your desires, being your own hype person. There's so many ways that we can build internal trust, and it will look different for each person listening. But that's anything that you can do, even the small, and I'll say too, we tend to think it needs to be a big step in order for it to count. Even the smallest things make the biggest difference. Like, I'm going to drink enough water today. That's the commitment I'm going to keep to myself. I'm just going to drink enough water. I'd rather you keep the smallest commitments over and over again, because you'll build to the big ones, than, the other way around.
Right. Because it's easy to break the commitments when, let's say, you haven't been working out in forever and you're like, all right, I'm going to work out 5 days a week for an hour a day. And it's like, okay, like, let's be realistic here too. Cause I can't tell you how many times I've done that. And then I'm like, you know what? I just need to move my body a couple times a week. I just need to get some movement in. And then you start doing that and you're like, okay, I'm feeling pretty good. Maybe I can add in another 20-minute day, like, I have to start slow like that, because I'll see like this big thing and I'm like, all right, I'm going to just like dive right in. And then I'm like, oh, I'm diving right back out. Like,
Again,
it doesn't work.
Liz, not just you, and I'm famous for that, because I had it in my mind that I needed to be dripping sweat, and I needed to do it 4 days a week for an hour plus in order for it to count, right? And that's, I mean, it has taken me so much time and so much pain and so much heartache and so much frustration to finally get to the point where it's like, I just get to move my body. And a lot of times I'll do that. I'm just going to do 5 minutes. I'm going to set a time. I'm just going to do 5 minutes. I've never only ever done 5 minutes, because once I get started, then I'll be like, oh, I'll walk for 15 minutes, or oh, I'm in the mode, or whatever. But I don't know what it is. We think only the big stuff counts. So one of the lies I believed is like, only big, bold acts, count. Like, when I think of being in relationship, I used to think the skywriting and the proposing at the baseball stadium and the big jewelry and the surprise trip, like, that's how you express love. And there's nothing wrong with any of those things. Those things are wonderful. But I thought the small things didn't count. Now, as I've been married for 12 years or now 13 years, and been in the best, most loving relationship, I recognize that it's the small things that matter the most, and that predictability is super sexy. And so, like, knowing what you can count on, that's where the magic has happened in our relationship. And I've started trying to apply that to myself, because again, I thought it had to be big and spontaneous and, bold in order for it to count. And it's like, no, it's usually, and by the way, the same with parenting. Yeah, I'm sure my kid is going to remember the day we took her to Disneyland, but I also know, because when I look back on my childhood, sometimes it's the smallest moments. It's the smell of a certain meal. It's sitting around the table. It's remembering when your mom sat on the floor and played with you. It's that game. It's not always the big stuff. It's the little stuff counts too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to thank you for sharing those 5 steps, because I feel like you gave like a lot of information for people to work on. And like you said, we kind of all go through it differently. But it's good to take action to work on trusting yourself. I love that that's like the actual definition of confidence, because I'm like, wait, like what areas do I trust myself? What areas do I not? Like there's just like, I feel like a lot to reflect on in this episode, and even like just so many good nuggets to take with us into parenting so that we can show up as confident parents. And then you're not only showing up as a confident parent for yourself, but for your children, and teaching that and passing that on. Because how many of us want to have confident kids? So I think part of breaking that counterculture thing is then like teaching our kids to trust themselves, like letting them make some decisions for themselves, giving them bodily autonomy, like having them be able to make decisions and us trust them. Okay, like I'm going to trust you to make this decision. And they're like, oh, my mom trusts me, like I can trust myself. You're building that in them, I think, which is so important.
Well, I think as it relates to confidence, one of the mistakes we can make is we are too quick to protect our children from failure or making mistakes or having, and it's the opportunity to not only trust them, even if, you're like, oh, this isn't going to be good, or the outcome isn't, I mean, and I'm not talking about anything that dramatically risks their safety or
Right.
mental or emotional well-being. I'm talking about just that more everyday stuff. Let them trust them, and sometimes it'll actually work out and you're like, oh, I was wrong. But also, okay, it didn't go the way you thought it was. Now I'm going to trust you to let's figure it out. How do you recover from this? How do you pick yourself back up? How do you apologize if you need to? There is so much confidence building work to be done in the things that don't go according to plan.
Right. I remember listening to a podcast quite a while ago about this person who was talking about how there's like helicopter parenting, but then there's something even like further than that. And I don't remember, it was like hover, something, where parents, you have this urge to want to go fix everything for your kids. And even like going to school, and, there's parents that are like, oh no, my kid would never do that, or my kid, whatever. And it's like, you have to, at some point, let them do their thing and not be a total hovering parent, as like you said, as long as it's not their safety, they're not in danger or whatever, but letting them make choices, letting them go through failures, trusting them that, okay, let's figure it out now. And that like builds so much coming into adults, because you have these people entering the adult world who literally don't know how to deal with the slightest form of confrontation. That's not even confrontation. That's somebody being like, hey, you can't sit there, or whatever it is. And they're like, like, I don't know how to deal with anything in this real world because everything's been fixed for me. So you have to let them do that in order to build confidence in themselves to exist in this world.
Yeah. Well, you're not giving your children the opportunity to build the trust in themselves that they can solve a problem, that they can fix a relationship, that they can overcome a challenge. And then when they're faced with even the small ones, the confidence isn't there. The firm and bold trust in self doesn't exist. And at its worst case, they don't have the coping skills, and we're seeing increases in suicide rates and I mean, there's just so much packaged in that. And again, I go back to, I know as parents, we are doing the best that we can. We all are. But I think a lot of times when we do that, we're if we're honest with ourselves, we're coming from a place of insecurity, fear, or some of those old lies that we're carrying forward and defaulting to, not from a place of confidence, firm, bold trust in self, courage, trust, all that fun stuff.
Yeah. Before we wrap up, I'd love for you to just tell everybody where they can find your book and buy it, or if there's any other ways that they can connect with you and your work that you're doing.
Yeah. So Validation is for Parking is available pretty much anywhere you buy books, not on a lot of small independent bookshelves, but I would love if you walk into a local bookstore and ask them to order it, because I'm a big proponent of supporting our local bookstores. But of course, Amazon and all the places. My website is NicoleKalil.com, and everything you could ever want to know about me is on there.
Perfect. Awesome. I will have all of that in the show notes. And I just want to thank you so much for coming on this episode. Again, I feel like this is such an important topic because it carries into every aspect of our life, and going into the season of life that we're in, we need it. We need to build confidence. We need to work on building that, on passing it down to our kids, share, like even showing up in our marriages, and not passing blame or having the ego or comparing or whatever it is. All of those are so important. So I just want to thank you so much for your wisdom today. And also I wanted to ask you, how do you take your morning Java?
So I am a drip coffee with a little bit of almond milk, half calf, one a day, because caffeine, like I'll go crazy. But I'm actually in the process of like considering changing it. I've heard a lot about the mushroom coffee. So we'll see that. It might not be that when this episode comes out.
Right. I've actually been weaning myself off of caffeine recently. So I've been doing half calf as well. And tomorrow I'm starting down to even less than half calf. So
let me know how it goes.
I will. But I just want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing all of your wisdom with us today.
It was my absolute pleasure. Thank you.